When the concert started, everyone was standing and applauding, but 7-year-old Marcus remained seated, his small hands on his knees, his head down. The teacher from the orphanage watched him with concern. She knew that Marcus had lost his parents a week ago and hadn't spoken since the shock. She thought coming to this concert might cheer him up a little, but no one could have predicted that Elvis Presley would notice that little broken heart, and what he would do next would melt the hearts of 25,000 people. The Golden Gate Orphanage in Memphis had seen many children come and go over the years, but Marcus Williams was different from the others. When he arrived just 1 week ago, he carried with him a silence so profound that it seemed to fill every room he entered. At 7 years old, Marcus had experienced a loss that most adults struggle to comprehend: the sudden death of both his parents in a tragic car accident that had torn his world apart in an instant. The accident had happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Marcus's parents, David and Maria Williams, were returning from their anniversary dinner when their car was struck by a drunk driver who ran a red light. They were killed instantly, leaving Marcus alone in the world with no immediate family willing or able to care for him. His only living relatives, a distant aunt and uncle in California, had made it clear that they couldn't take on the responsibility of raising a child. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, the head supervisor at Golden Gate Orphanage, had worked with traumatized children for over 20 years, but Marcus's case touched her heart in a particularly deep way. The little boy had not spoken a single word since arriving at the facility. He would eat when food was placed in front of him, follow instructions when gently guided, and go to bed when told, but he moved through his days like a ghost, present in body but absent in spirit. The other children at the orphanage had tried to include Marcus in their games and activities, but he seemed unable or unwilling to connect with anyone. During playtime, he would sit alone in a corner, staring at his hands or gazing out the window with eyes that seemed much older than his 7 years. At night, the staff would sometimes hear him crying softly into his pillow, but when they approached to comfort him, he would pretend to be asleep. Sandra Mitchell, the child psychologist who visited the orphanage twice a week, had explained to Mrs. Patterson that Marcus was experiencing severe trauma-induced selective mutism. He's not choosing to be silent, she had said during their meeting. His mind is protecting him from a reality that's too painful to process. Speaking requires acknowledging that his world has changed forever, and he's not ready for that yet. Mrs. Patterson had tried everything she could think of to reach Marcus. She had introduced him to art therapy, hoping he might express his feelings through drawing or painting. She had tried music therapy, thinking that rhythm and melody might speak to him in ways that words could not. She had even brought in a therapy dog named Rusty, whose gentle presence had helped other children in similar situations. But nothing seemed to penetrate the wall of silence that Marcus had built around himself. It was during one of these challenging weeks that Mrs. Patterson received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The caller identified himself as a representative from Elvis Presley's management team, explaining that the King of Rock and Roll was planning a special charity concert to benefit local orphanages and children's homes in the Memphis area. Mr. Presley would like to invite a group of children from your facility to attend the concert as his special guests, the representative explained. All expenses would be covered, and we'd provide transportation to and from the venue. Mrs. Patterson's initial reaction was one of excitement mixed with concern. While she knew that most of the children would be thrilled by such an opportunity, she worried about how the overwhelming environment of a large concert might affect the more vulnerable children in her care, particularly Marcus. However, after discussing the opportunity with her staff and consulting with Dr. Mitchell, she decided that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. The psychologist suggested that exposure to music and a celebratory atmosphere might help some of the children, including Marcus, begin to reconnect with positive emotions and experiences. Sometimes, Dr. Mitchell had said, healing happens in unexpected places. Music has a way of reaching parts of the human spirit that traditional therapy cannot touch. Mrs. Patterson carefully selected 12 children for the concert, ranging in age from 6 to 14. She made sure to include Marcus in the group, hoping against hope that the experience might somehow break through his silence and isolation. The day of the concert, August 15th, 1975, dawned bright and clear. The International Hotel in Las Vegas was buzzing with preparation for what was expected to be one of Elvis's most memorable performances. The venue had been specially decorated for the charity event, with banners thanking the local orphanages and children's homes for their work in the community. As the Golden Gate Orphanage bus pulled up to the hotel, the children pressed their faces against the windows in amazement. Most of them had never seen anything as grand as the International Hotel, with its towering height, glittering lights, and constant stream of elegantly dressed people flowing in and out of the entrance. "Look at all those fancy cars," exclaimed Jenny, a 10-year-old who had been at the orphanage for 3 years. "And look at all those people in pretty dresses," added Tommy, an 8-year-old whose enthusiasm was infectious. But Marcus remained silent, sitting in his seat with the same blank expression he had worn for the past week. Mrs. Patterson glanced at him with concern, hoping that the excitement of the other children might somehow reach him, but he seemed as disconnected as ever. Inside the venue, the children were escorted to a special section that had been reserved specifically for them. Excellent seats with a clear view of the stage. The staff from the orphanage helped the children get settled, making sure they had everything they needed for what promised to be an incredible evening. As the venue began to fill with people, the energy in the room became palpable. Thousands of Elvis fans streamed through the entrances, their excitement building as they anticipated seeing their idol perform. The sound of conversation, laughter, and anticipation filled the air, creating an atmosphere of celebration and joy. The children from the orphanage watched in fascination as the venue transformed around them. They had never been part of such a large gathering, and the sheer scale of the event was overwhelming in the best possible way. Most of them were chattering excitedly, pointing out different aspects of the venue and speculating about what Elvis would be like in person. Mrs. Patterson noticed that several of the children were becoming emotional, but in a positive way. She saw tears of joy in the eyes of some of the older children who understood the significance of this opportunity. For many of them, this would be the first time they had experienced something purely fun and celebratory since arriving at the orphanage. But Marcus remained unchanged. While the other children were animated and engaged, he sat quietly in his seat, his small hands folded in his lap, his eyes focused on some invisible point in front of him. It was as if the excitement and energy swirling around him could not penetrate the cocoon of silence and sadness that surrounded him. When the lights dimmed and Elvis finally took the stage, the reaction from the crowd was explosive. 25,000 people rose to their feet as one, applauding, cheering, and calling out his name. The sound was deafening, a wall of adoration and excitement that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Elvis appeared in one of his iconic white jumpsuits, sparkling with rhinestones that caught the stage lights and threw tiny rainbows across the venue. His presence was magnetic, commanding the attention of every person in the massive space. He raised his hand in acknowledgement of the crowd's enthusiasm, his famous smile lighting up his face as he prepared to begin his performance. The children from Golden Gate Orphanage were on their feet with everyone else, clapping and cheering with unbridled excitement. Even some of the quieter children who were usually shy in large groups were caught up in the moment, their faces glowing with happiness and wonder. Everyone, that is, except Marcus. While 25,000 people stood and applauded around him, Marcus remained seated. His posture was exactly the same as it had been when they first arrived. Small hands on his knees, head slightly bowed, eyes focused downward. He seemed completely unaware of the celebration happening around him, lost in his own world of silence and grief. Mrs. Patterson, who was seated directly behind Marcus, felt her heart break as she watched him. She had hoped so desperately that this experience would reach him somehow, that the joy and excitement might crack through his defensive shell. But seeing him sit motionless while everyone around him celebrated made his isolation seem even more profound. She leaned forward and gently placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. she whispered. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Marcus didn't respond or even acknowledge her touch. He continued to stare at his hands as if he were alone in the room rather than surrounded by thousands of people experiencing one of the most exciting moments of their lives. Elvis began his performance with CC Rider, his powerful voice filling every corner of the venue. The crowd sang along enthusiastically, their voices joining with his in a celebration of music and shared joy. The children from the orphanage were completely captivated, some of them singing along to songs they recognized, others simply swaying to the rhythm and soaking in the incredible atmosphere. As Elvis moved through his repertoire of hits, he displayed the charisma and connection with his audience that had made him a legend. He would point to different sections of the crowd, make eye contact with individual fans, and create moments of personal connection even in such a massive venue. His ability to make each person feel like he was singing directly to them was part of what made his live performances so magical. It was during his performance of Love Me Tender that something changed. Elvis was about halfway through the song when his gaze swept across the audience and landed on the section where the orphanage children were seated. What he saw there caused him to pause, almost imperceptibly, in his performance. Among a group of children who were all standing, swaying, and clearly enjoying themselves, Elvis spotted one small figure who was different. A little boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old, sitting perfectly still while everyone around him celebrated. Even from the stage, Elvis could sense that something was profoundly wrong with this child. Elvis had performed for countless audiences over the years, and he had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the emotions of his crowds. He could feel joy, excitement, sadness, and need. Even among thousands of people, what he sensed from this particular child was a level of pain and isolation that was heartbreaking in its intensity. Without breaking his performance, Elvis began to focus more of his attention on that section of the audience. He could see that the boy was with a group of other children who appeared to be from some kind of institution or organized group. The woman behind the boy kept glancing at him with obvious concern, her expression mixing worry with deep compassion. As Elvis continued singing, he found himself drawn back to that small, motionless figure again and again. There was something about the child's stillness that spoke of a pain too deep for words, a hurt that had left him unable to participate in the joy surrounding him. During the instrumental break in Love Me Tender, Elvis made a decision that would surprise everyone in the venue, including his own band. Instead of moving into the next planned song, he walked to the front of the stage and addressed the audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, his voice carrying clearly through the venue's sound system, "I want to talk to you about something important. Music has the power to heal, to bring joy, and to let us know that we're not alone in this world. But sometimes there are folks who are hurting so deeply that even music can't reach them right away." The crowd quieted, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Elvis rarely stopped his performances to speak at length, so when he did, people paid attention. Elvis shielded his eyes against the bright stage lights and looked directly toward the section where Marcus was seated. "I see a little boy out there who looks like he might be carrying some heavy burdens. Son, would you stand up for me?" Mrs. Patterson's heart began to race as she realized that Elvis was talking about Marcus. She gently touched the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Marcus, sweetie, the man on stage is talking to you." But Marcus didn't respond. He remained seated, his head still bowed, apparently unaware that the attention of 25,000 people was focused on him. Elvis, seeing that the child wasn't responding, spoke again, his voice even gentler than before. "That's okay, son. You don't have to stand up if you don't want to, but I want you to know that I see you, and I want you to know that you're not alone." The venue was now completely silent except for Elvis's voice. 25,000 people were witnessing something extraordinary, a superstar reaching out to one hurting child in a moment of pure compassion and connection. "I don't know what kind of pain you are carrying, little man," Elvis continued, "but I want you to know that it's okay to hurt. It's okay to be sad. And it's okay if you're not ready to be happy yet. But I also want you to know that there are people who care about you, and that someday, when you're ready, The music will be here, waiting for you." Mrs. Patterson was crying openly now, as were many of the other adults in the venue. Even some of the audience members who didn't know the specific situation were moved to tears by the obvious compassion and sincerity in Elvis's voice. But it was what happened next that truly shocked everyone present. For the first time since the accident, Marcus slowly raised his head and looked directly at Elvis. Their eyes met across the vast distance of the venue, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection, a recognition of shared humanity. Then, in a voice so quiet that only Mrs. Patterson and the children immediately around him could hear, Marcus spoke his first words in over a week. "My mommy and daddy died," he whispered. Mrs. Patterson gasped and immediately knelt down beside Marcus's chair. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, gathering him into her arms as he finally began to cry. Not the silent tears he had been shedding alone at night, but deep, healing sobs that seemed to release the grief he had been carrying inside. Elvis, still on stage, couldn't hear Marcus's words, but he could see that something had changed. He could see the woman holding the child, could see the other children gathering around them, could sense that a breakthrough of some kind had occurred. "That's right, son," Elvis said softly into the microphone. "Let it out. Sometimes we have to feel the sadness before we can feel the joy again." Elvis then did something that no one in the venue would ever forget. He began to sing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands," but he sang it directly to Marcus, his voice filled with such tenderness and compassion that there wasn't a dry eye in the house. As Elvis sang, something beautiful happened throughout the venue. Other audience members began to join in, their voices rising in harmony with his. Soon, 25,000 people were singing together, creating a moment of unity and shared compassion that transcended entertainment and became something profoundly spiritual. Marcus, still in Mrs. Patterson's arms, looked up at Elvis and, for the first time since the tragedy, smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but it was real. And in that moment, everyone in the venue knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. After the song ended, Elvis walked to the edge of the stage closest to Marcus's section. "I want everyone in this building to remember something," he said. "We all have the power to help heal each other. Sometimes it's through music. Sometimes it's through kindness, and sometimes it's just through letting someone know that they're not alone." This little boy reminded me tonight of why we make music in the first place. Not for fame or fortune, but to connect with each other and to help each other through both the good times and the hard times. The rest of Elvis's performance that night was extraordinary, but everyone agreed that the most important moment had been his connection with Marcus. After the concert, Elvis insisted on meeting with the children from the orphanage personally. He spent nearly an hour with them, but he gave special attention to Marcus, who was now speaking quietly but steadily, telling Elvis about his parents and sharing memories of happier times. Before they left that night, Elvis gave Marcus a special gift, a small gold pendant shaped like a microphone. "This is so you'll remember," Elvis told him, "that your voice matters. When you're ready to use it again, the world will be listening." The impact of that evening on Marcus's recovery was profound. While he still had difficult days and moments of sadness, he began to speak regularly and to participate in activities at the orphanage. More importantly, he began to believe that life could be good again, that joy was possible even after tremendous loss. Mrs. Patterson would later say that she had witnessed a miracle that night. "I've worked with traumatized children for decades," she would tell people, "but I've never seen anything like what happened when Elvis reached out to Marcus. It wasn't just the fame or the spectacle, it was genuine human compassion reaching across a vast space to touch one hurting child." The story of Marcus and Elvis spread far beyond that concert venue. It became a testament to the power of empathy, the importance of seeing and acknowledging pain, and the incredible healing that can happen when someone takes the time to truly connect with another human being.
Marcus was eventually adopted by a loving family who had heard his story and wanted to give him the home he deserved.
He grew up to become a music teacher, always crediting that night with Elvis as the moment when he learned that music could heal the deepest wounds and connect people across any distance. And every year on the anniversary of that concert, Marcus would hold the small gold microphone pendant Elvis had given him, and remember the night when 25,000 people witnessed the power of one person's compassion to change a life forever. The evening proved that sometimes the most important moments in life happen not when everything is going well, but when someone chooses to reach out to another person who is struggling. Elvis's decision to stop his performance and acknowledge one hurting child reminded everyone present that true greatness comes not from talent alone, but from the willingness to use that talent in service of love and healing.